going to introduce the burning and the dodging tool. So for our light, shadow, and reflection projects, we are focusing on editing. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at how you edit these and whether or not you make them. You want to edit them to have, good exposure, good contrast. You want the picture to appear evenly lit, or not just way too dark in one spot and way too bright in another spot. You might want to work with the color balance, and the last thing is you can choose to make it black and white. All right, so those are all things to consider, but today I want to show you specifically the tools called for burning and dodging. Okay, and they are over here, the burning and the dodging tool. Okay, we're going to start out with the burning tool. And these symbols, that there's a little hand here, back in the days of the darkroom, when we would burn in, you would cover up the picture and give more light to part of the picture. Sometimes you used your hand to cover up part of the picture and only let light in through a small hole, between your fingers. And that's why we have that symbol for the burning in tool, because you're selectively giving one small portion of the photo more exposure. With the dodging tool, we used to, again, in the darkroom, you would take a piece of cardboard and tape it to a very narrow stick. Maybe sometimes we would use coat hanger, and you would cover up a spot that that was too dark. Okay, where all the shadow tones were blocked up and they were all blending together. So you would give less exposure. You would cover up the portion that was getting too dark and shake it with this little stick, okay, to, give it so that it got less exposure than the rest of the picture. Okay, so that is where these two little symbols come from. So we're going to go to the burning in tool first. Before we do any burning in, let's see what we can do with our regular workflow pictures. Okay, so for the regular workflow, again, it's always the same. Levels first to set the black and white point or check it. Curves second to handle the mid-tones and the contrast. And then lastly, we can do color balance if needed, or you can decide to make it black and white if you want to. All right, so down here, okay, on the layers palette over here, we've got our adjustment layers. We're going to click on the pop-up menu here, and we're going to start with levels. Okay, with levels, we are looking at a histogram. Okay, this is a graph of all of the tones in the picture from white to middle gray to black. Okay, so we can see there are a lot of darker gray midtones, a lot of lighter gray midtones, a little spike of white over here. Okay, but there's no data right here for black. So it's missing a maximum black in the picture. There's nothing in the picture. The darkest shadow is not maximum black, it's just kind of a gray. So we can reassign black by taking this black slider and moving it in toward the data. Okay, with Photopea, you can kind of, in Photoshop, it's an arrow, and you know exactly to put the point on where the data begins. It's a little unclear in Photopea. I usually try and put it about in the middle of the square. So that's where the hill of data starts to rise. So we need to put the black slider, right where that hill of data from the darkest tone in the picture starts to rise. That makes that darkest tone black. And we can see that that is probably, somewhere in some of these tones, in here. Okay, or maybe right about here. Okay, so we've done our levels. Next, we're going to go with curves. Okay, with curves, we've got our white point here, our black point here. We've already set those in levels. We don't want to move those out of the corner. Okay, so we have to decide, we want to make this picture darker still. It's still looking very overexposed, because the photographer, who happens to be Brianna Galindo from my first period class, um, so she was shooting right into the sun, which sometimes can be really cool. You can get some cool silhouettes, but usually these pictures you have to go back and edit to make them look good. So we're gonna be pulling the tones down. I'm gonna start from the lighter gray tones because this is where I really want to make it darker. So remember, this is white, this is light gray, middle gray, dark gray, and black. I'm going to go somewhere in the light gray tonal range and pull it down. Okay. Now, I don't want to pull it down so much that down here, now here, if I pull it down too much, this starts to bleed into, the black starts to blend all together. So I have to kind of keep my eye on that because I still want to see the fence down at the bottom. So if I make the top look as dark as I would like to, the bottom gets too dark. So I'm going to move it back. Okay. So I keep an eye on that, and when it starts, when the bottom starts to lose, when all the colors start to blend into black, then I need to kind of back it off and put it right about there maybe. Now, that looks good for down here, but we're still looking overexposed up here. Okay, so this is where I'm going to go and do the burning and dodging tool. Okay, now this particular picture doesn't appear to me to need color balance. I guess we can check it out here. Look at the color balance. Let's see, if we add a little bit of red to warm it up, we could do that, but I mean, this is kind of a rusty fence, I believe. I would probably not touch green and magenta, and then I might take a little blue out, but it starts to look kind of yellow right away, so I'm going to take that back to 0. And so I have to decide whether I want it this way with a little bit of red added or back to what it was. I really see no difference, so I'm going to leave it alone. Okay, so I think it's fine just the way it is. All right, so the next thing is we're going to be making this area at the top darker to even out the picture. So we've got a really nice, a good exposure down here. Up here it's still looking very overexposed and very kind of faded in our darker tones. So we're going to go over to our burning and dodging tool. Now the dodging tool will be on top, so you have to look for the dodging tool. When you find it, you click and hold and open that little drawer up and go down to the burning tool and click on it so it appears on top. Okay, the burning tool is making the picture darker. The dodging tool is making it lighter in specific areas that you choose. So here is we have to go to the options for the burning tool. And right here we have if I go to the drop down, these are the drop downs for the brushes. This is the size. I can bring it down a little right now. The hardness, actually the default is on 100%, so you're going to have to bring it down to 0. Okay, we want the edges to, blend in, to fade in. Okay, so if you leave it at 100%, let me show you what it's going to look like. Well, I'll show you in a second because I forgot to duplicate my background layer, which I'll do in a second. Here, I'm going to put it on 100, click off of this for now, and I'm going to go over here. So before we do any of our burning in, we do have to duplicate the background layer because the burning and dodging tools are destructive editing tools. That means they're going to change the pixels. Unlike these adjustment layers, these are just kind of almost like filters that are floating above the picture, which we can turn off or delete if we want to. We can get rid of them. They're not affecting the pixels. But burning and dodging does affect the pixels. So I'm going to duplicate the layer in case I make a big mistake and I keep burning in and burning in, I lose it on the history and I can't go back. Okay, if I need to, I can always delete this layer and start again. Add another new layer. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our burn tool and go back to the options. Now, if, as I said, the default is 100% on the hardness of the brush. So when we do that, if you look, you can look carefully, you see circles. You see the edges of the circle very crisply, okay, very clearly. So I pushed Command Z, which makes it go back one step in history. I'm going to go back to my options and make sure I bring it down to 0% hardness so that when I make it darker, the edges will fade and it will blend in. All right, now exposure, 50% is a very high exposure. You might want to start down at maybe more like 12 to 15. If it's really bright, you might go up to like 20 or 30. We'll start with 12 and we can always add more. Okay, so now since I'm going to be doing a very large area, I like to use a large brush. If you use a smaller brush, it's going to be harder to blend. So you want to use the biggest brush that you can, so it blends together nicely. All right, one more thing I forgot up here. We have the option, it's a very nice option, of making the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights darker. Generally, I don't make the highlights darker because that tends to just make them look low contrast and gray. So I usually use the burning tool with the midtones or the shadows. I'm going to start with the midtones today and possibly, we'll see. I don't think I will need to go to the shadows, but we'll see how it goes. All right, now that I have everything set up here, my brush is soft edged. I'm going to make the midtones darker. My exposure is at 12%. So I'm going to kind of go over this and you can see it's subtly getting darker. Now I am very impatient, so I'm going to bump it up to 30. Okay. And now we can see it's getting darker much quicker. You just have to be careful if you do have it bumped way up not to, make it get too dark. Okay, so you don't want to, you want to keep a close eye on it. Okay, and you want to try to make it even. All right, and sometimes I'm clicking and sometimes I'm kind of moving it around in a nice even motion. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm liking that. So if I take this off, this is the before I did the burning in, and this is after. So that's made it fairly even, and I think it looks better, much better than it did before. Okay, so when you're done with the burning in, you can go to File, Save as PSD to save your layers. That one is for you in case you want to go back later and change it, drag it onto your desktop. And then the next one we're going to do is a JPEG, and that will be for uploading. Okay, so we're going to change the quality to 100%, push save. Okay, now I'm not going to ask you to turn in burning and dodging practice this time. I want you to use it if you need to. We might do this in class together, just to practice it, but it's a really handy tool. Okay, so that was our first one, and that was burning in. We're going to take a look at another one, and we're going to try we're using both the burning and the dodging tool. Okay, so this picture is actually a screenshot. Okay, let me get my brush down here. This picture is a screenshot of a picture by Phoenix Backley in my first period class from his My Perspective. I think Brianna's was from her light, shadow, and reflection. All right, in this one, we've got some unevenness, like in this area. We're losing the detail of the figure in the front. When I first saw it, I didn't even realize there was a figure there because I saw it really small, and a lot of the lines of the edges of the figure are bleeding into the black of the background or of the ground. Okay, so again, we're gonna take a look at this. The other thing you know, since we're focusing on editing, you have to kind of diagnose any picture you look at. It's like, how could I make this picture better? Okay, so I'm going to go with my crop tool first because if you look, the horizon line is on a diagonal. It looks like it's sliding off to the left. So if we use the crop tool, okay, pull it across. I'm sorry, the crop tool is over here on the toolbar. Okay, and we have it on free as opposed to fixed. So we can just, you know, just pull it across in any shape we want or any rectangle we want. Now, if I want to turn this, because what I want to do is I want to make this line parallel with this line. Sometimes I do this, I pull down the top or the bottom line, and then I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to pull it away from the edge of the bounding box and click, and then I can turn this until it appears to be about parallel, just kind of estimate, to the horizon line. Okay, once I have it there, then I can pull this back up, but I want to make sure those little boxes at the edges stay within the boundaries of the photo. Okay, I'm going to make this a little smaller, Command minus, so I can see the bottom here. Pull that up within the boundaries of the photo. And I can't make this go up higher because then this one will go out of the boundaries. All right, once I've got it so that the top and bottom are parallel to the horizon line and all of the corners are within the boundaries of the picture, I push the check mark and it's straightened out. Next, we're going to do levels. Like we did before, check the black and white point. If I look here, there is a little tiny bit of data here. I could possibly, when there's such a flat line of data, I could pull it in, but generally it just looks like it makes this too overexposed. So I'm going to leave it where it is. And it's actually a little underexposed, so it's definitely, you know, it's going right up to the edge with all of the tones. Okay, so we're not going to touch the black slider this time. All right, next we go to curves. Okay, with curves, I'm thinking, okay, I want to make the darkest tones lighter to open it up. So I'm going to go here, okay, and if I go any lighter, it definitely makes the other, you know, parts look too overexposed. So I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this layer. Okay, I drag it down to the make a new layer. Okay, and then I am going to go to the dodging tool. So go into the dodging tool. This picture is very tiny because it was a screenshot. There we go. Bring the brush down. Okay, want to make sure that the hardness of the brush, default is 100%. I want to bring it down to 0%. This time I'm going to be dodging, so dodging is making it lighter. I'm going to make the shadows lighter. And then the exposure, I'm going to leave it at 33% because I want it to go pretty quickly. All right, so if I simply kind of drag it or click it in there, now I do see it. I have to be careful not to go too far. Like in here, I'm still not seeing the edge, and it just kind of looks low contrast. So I'm going to Command Z and go back one step there. So I think if we take a look here, just that little bit of dodging brought out the figure, and I think it's subtle enough that it looks okay. Now over here, maybe I want to kind of open up the shadows a little bit too. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. Right about there. Okay. There we go. Okay, so that looks fine. Now maybe in this area I'd like to do some burning in. Okay, make this part darker. So I'm going to go to the mid-tones and I'm going to make it darker just kind of around this light to make it match. Maybe I'll go and hit that one too, since it's a little overexposed from the lights kind of being very bright there. And there is a little bit of a flare there, which I could kind of bring down, possibly. Okay. All right. So here is my original, and here is the final. Okay. So again, we can save it as a PSD, and then we can also save it as a JPEG, because that's what you're going to upload. And that flattens all the layers out, so you can't go back and work on it after that. All right, so that is burning and dodging, and I hope you use those tools when you need them. All right, good luck. Thanks. Bye.